लाइफ में लेना देना तो चलता रहता है। इधर फ्लेक्सी लोन से बोरो कर लिया और उधर बाय मॉम डैड का वेकेशन डन। शादी का डिसीजन लिया, फ्लेक्सी लोन से और बोरो किया। प्रमोशन मिला तो ये लो थोड़ा लोन वापस कर दिया। थैंक यू। नए इंटीरियर्स का डील किया, फ्लेक्सी लोन से फिर थोड़ा ले लिया। ईयर एंड बोनस मिला तो इस बार लोन ज्यादा वापस कर दिया। लाइफ में लेना देना चलता रहेगा तो लोन्स में क्यों नहीं। इसीलिए फ्लेक्सी लोन फ्रॉम बजाज फिनसर्व एक ऐसा लोन जो जब चाहे बोरो करें, जैसे चाहे रीपे करें, वो भी चुटकी में। थिंक इट डन विद बजाज फिनसर्व।
हेलो, हर सीजन के लिए नए इंटीरियर्स।
हाँ, वो भी हर रूम के लिए।
फ्रिज, स्मार्टफोन या बड़ा टीवी,
तीनों क्यों नहीं?
अरे ये तो शॉपिंग लिस्ट में नहीं था।
सो अब शॉपिंग कार्ट में तो है। सॉरी।
अच्छा, नए आउटफिट्स की विश लिस्ट।
विश क्यों? Just add to cart and buy।
तो ये सब EMI पे?
और वो भी चुटकी में। On India's fastest growing EMI network. Think it done with Bajaj Finserv।
सर, अपनों को खुश रखना इससे आसान हो ही नहीं सकता। साहब, अपनों को खुश रखना इससे आसान हो ही नहीं सकता। हुजूर, अपनों को खुश रखना इससे आसान हो ही नहीं सकता।
अपनों को खुश रखना इससे आसान।
अपनों को खुशियां दिलाना आसान नहीं बनाते तो आगे कैसे बढ़ते। इसीलिए हम जो भी करते हैं उसे बेहतर बनाते आ रहे हैं, बनाते रहेंगे। बजाज फिनसर्व, थिंक इट डन।
माँ के बेडरूम का एसी या लेटेस्ट मोबाइल फॉर भाई, लेटेस्ट मोबाइल फॉर भाई, लेटेस्ट मोबाइल फॉर भाई। पुणे, पटना, चेन्नई, मथुरा या फिर बेगूसराय, या फिर बेगूसराय, या फिर बेगूसराय। नए घर के लिए चाहिए 4K टीवी हाई फाई, या फिर वाइफ को चाहिए लेटेस्ट स्टाइल। EMI है ना, EMI है ना, EMI। मॉड्यूलर किचन में पुराना फ्रिज क्यों है भाई?
शादी है नहीं, मैट्रेस पुराना है भाई, पुराना है भाई। अक्खा इंडिया बोले भाई प्राइजेस है हाई, बेस्ट ही खरीदना है तो अपने EMI स्टोर पर आए।
EMI है ना, EMI।
अब काशी हो या वाशी, महंगा लगी तो EMI और बेस्ट ही चाहिए तो भी EMI, क्योंकि बजाज फिनसर्व का EMI है ना। विजिट www.emistore.com।
EMI है ना, EMI है ना, EMI।
नाची 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 नाची। धोखा है धोखा, धोखा ना खाओ जी। नाची 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 नाची। इंश्योरेंस फ्रॉड से बचना है बहुत जरूरी जी। नाची 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 नाची। वो एजेंट है या फ्रॉड पता लगाओ जी। एक्स्ट्रा ऑफर के झांसे में कहीं फंस ना जाओ जी।
अगर कोई अनजान कॉलर इंश्योरेंस पॉलिसी डिटेल्स मांगे तो कह देना उनको
मिलके स्कैम को एंड करो, हमेशा सेफ रहो जी।
Always verify the caller and do not surrender your insurance for attractive offers. हमेशा सावधान रहे, safe रहे. Issued in the interest of public awareness by Bajaj Finserv.
नाची 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 नाची। धोखा है धोखा, धोखा ना खाओ जी। नाची 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 नाची। जो होगा सो होगा ऐसे ना सोचो जी कॉल पे कोई पूछे ओटीपी दो ना जी तो कह देना उनको मिलके स्कैम को एंड करो हमेशा सेफ रहो जी
Being a hero is all about heart. It's not about ruling the world. It's about owning it. It's not about winning a race. It's about delivering a smile to the human race. It's about a spirit that just cannot be confined by geographies. It's about the heart that beats for the future. And a soul that echoes the values of generations. And yet, being a hero is never about the hero. It's about the millions who celebrate them. Hero Motorcorp, the motorcycle leader. There's a gush of wind that hums a sweet song. There's a gush of wind that fights like a hero to fill the world with possibility. There's a gush of wind that jumps across oceans and mountains, embracing the entire planet. There's a gush of wind that blows away darkness. There's a gush of wind that blows for humanity. Because at Hero, we care.
In 1868, the Tata Group was founded on a philosophy that put the community at the heart of its existence. Today, we are $100 billion global enterprise. Our today has been built on enduring values. Today is about delivering excellence across business sectors. Today is about building a future-ready nation. Our today has a strong foundation with community at its core. Today is dedicated to the communities we serve. Our today is always about more than just today. Our today is a continuous journey for a better tomorrow. Tata, leadership with trust.
Behold, the story of victory, of life over malady. Behold the saga of power, of science over sickness. Behold the tale of triumph, of dedication over disease. Behold the rise and rise of Cadila Pharmaceuticals Limited, one of India's largest privately held pharmaceutical companies based out of Ahmedabad, Gujarat, India. Cadila Pharmaceuticals was born out of the vision of a legend who left an indelible mark in the chronicles of Indian pharmaceuticals industry. He was Indravadan Ambalal Modi, the founder chairman of the company, rightfully christened as the medicine man of India. His vision to alleviate pain of the underprivileged through research-driven innovations has been driving Cadila Pharmaceuticals for more than 6 decades now. Innovations which are backed by the key strengths of the company, the state-of-the-art manufacturing and research facilities. The flagship manufacturing facility at Dholka, Gujarat, sprawls over 100 acres. This avant-garde facility is US FDA approved, besides meeting most of the stringent quality standards across the globe. It manufactures tablets, capsules, injectables, liquids, and orals. The second formulations manufacturing facility is located at Samba in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. The API facilities at Ankleshwar, Gujarat, manufacture a large number of key APIs and intermediates at this US FDA and ISO 9002 and ISO 14001 accredited plant. The company also has set up its first ever overseas formulation manufacturing facility at Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. This world-class facility is the only WHO CGMP compliant manufacturing facility in the region. More than 850 products spread across 12 specialties with many of India's top brands in its basket. Great goals are defined by far-sighted vision and achieved by seamless teamwork. A multicultural, multilingual and multinational workforce of over 7,000 employees is truly the propelling power of the company. Not just in the domestic market, the company has a wide global footprint with over 1,000 marketing authorizations across 85 countries. Its international sales force of over 150 highly diversified and versatile personnel lends it an outreach that blankets the globe. As the company grows, so does its commitment to research. Manned by more than 350 scientists, the R&D facilities of Cadila Pharmaceuticals at Dholka, Gujarat is an institution of breakthrough innovations. To take the focus on innovation to the next level, it partners with leading international companies to discover newer treatments. The Cadila Pharmaceuticals Group is gigantic. Its group companies complement and expand the dynamic vision of the company across new avenues of healthcare and newer fast-paced business areas. Cadila Pharmaceuticals is a gentle giant. Decades of dedicated research, groundbreaking healthcare innovations, and worldwide impact proves the infinite potential of one powerful emotion. Care. The success of Cadila Pharmaceuticals bears testimony to the fact that the care continues.
आने वाले कल की दस्तक हमें सुनाई देती है, नई मंजिल है जिस ओर हमें वो दिशा दिखाई देती है। नए इंडिया का नया जोश, नए इंडिया का नया जोश, नए जोश से निकल पड़े हम, आने वाला कल होगा हमारा। नए इंडिया का नया जोश।
और नए इंडिया के सफर में टेक्नोलॉजी की शक्ति लेकर आपका भागीदार रहेगा रिलायंस। नए इंडिया का नया जोश।
लाइफ में लेना देना तो चलता रहता है। इधर फ्लेक्सी लोन से बोरो कर लिया और उधर बाय मॉम डैड का वेकेशन डन। शादी का डिसीजन लिया, फ्लेक्सी लोन से और बोरो किया। प्रमोशन मिला तो ये लो थोड़ा लोन वापस कर दिया, थैंक यू। नए इंटीरियर्स का दिल किया, फ्लेक्सी लोन से फिर थोड़ा ले लिया। ईयर एंड बोनस मिला तो इस बार लोन ज्यादा वापस कर दिया। लाइफ में लेना देना चलता रहेगा तो लोन्स में क्यों नहीं। इसीलिए फ्लेक्सी लोन फ्रॉम बजाज फिनसर्व एक ऐसा लोन जो जब चाहे बोरो करे, जैसे चाहे रीपे करे, वो भी चुटकी में। थिंक इट डन विद बजाज फिनसर्व।
हेलो, हर सीजन के लिए नए इंटीरियर्स?
हाँ, वो भी हर रूम के लिए।
फ्रिज, स्मार्टफोन या बड़ा टीवी?
तीनों क्यों नहीं?
अरे ये तो शॉपिंग लिस्ट में नहीं था।
So, अब शॉपिंग कार्ट में तो है। सॉरी।
अच्छा, नए आउटफिट्स की विश लिस्ट।
विश क्यों? Just add to cart and buy।
तो ये सब EMI पे?
और वो भी चुटकी में। On India's fastest growing EMI network. Think it done with Bajaj Finserv.
सर, अपनों को खुश रखना इससे आसान हो ही नहीं सकता। साहब, अपनों को खुश रखना इससे आसान हो ही नहीं सकता। हुजूर, अपनों को खुश रखना इससे आसान हो ही नहीं सकता।
अपनों को खुश रखना इससे आसान।
अपनों को खुशियां दिलाना आसान नहीं बनाते तो आगे कैसे बढ़ते। इसीलिए हम जो भी करते हैं उसे बेहतर बनाते आ रहे हैं, बनाते रहेंगे। बजाज फिनसर्व, थिंक इट डन।
माँ के बेडरूम का एशिया लेटेस्ट मोबाइल फॉर भाई, लेटेस्ट मोबाइल फॉर भाई, लेटेस्ट मोबाइल फॉर भाई। पुणे, पटना, चेन्नई, मथुरा या फिर बेगूसराय,
या फिर बेगूसराय।
नए घर के लिए चाहिए 4K टीवी हाई फाई, या फिर वाइफ को चाहिए लेटेस्ट स्टाइल। EMI है ना, EMI है ना, EMI।
मॉड्यूलर किचन में पुराना फ्रिज क्यों है भाई?
शादी है नहीं, मैट्रेस पुराना है भाई। अक्खा इंडिया बोले भाई प्राइजेस है हाई, बेस्ट ही खरीदना है तो अपने EMI स्टोर पर आए।
EMI है ना, EMI।
अब काशी हो या वाशी, महंगा लगे तो EMI और बेस्ट ही चाहिए तो भी EMI, क्योंकि बजाज फिनसर्व का EMI है ना। विजिट www.emistore.com।
EMI है ना, EMI है ना, EMI।
Naji, 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 naji. धोखा है धोखा, धोखा ना खाओ जी. नाजी, 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 नाजी. इंश्योरेंस फ्रॉड से बचना है बहुत जरूरी जी. नाजी, 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 नाजी. वो एजेंट है या फ्रॉड पता लगाओ जी. एक्स्ट्रा ऑफर के झांसे में कहीं फंस ना जाओ जी.
अगर कोई अनजान कॉलर इंश्योरेंस पॉलिसी डिटेल्स मांगे तो कह देना उनको.
नाजी, 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 नाजी. मिलके स्कैम को एंड करो, हमेशा सेफ रहो जी.
Always verify the caller and do not surrender your insurance for attractive offers. हमेशा सावधान रहे, safe रहे. Issued in the interest of public awareness by Bajaj Finserv.
Naji, 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 naji. धोखा है धोखा, धोखा ना खाओ जी. नाजी, 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 नाजी. जो होगा सो होगा, ऐसे ना सोचो जी. नाजी, 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 नाजी. कॉल पे कोई पूछे OTP दो ना जी.
तो कह देना उनको.
नाजी, 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 नाजी. मिलके स्कैम को एंड करो, हमेशा सेफ रहो जी.
Being a hero is all about heart. It's not about ruling the world. It's about owning it. It's not about winning a race. It's about delivering a smile to the human race. It's about a spirit that just cannot be confined by geographies. It's about the heart that beats for the future and a soul that echoes the values of generations. And yet, being a hero is never about the hero. It's about the millions who celebrate them. Hero Motorcorp, the motorcycle leader. There's a gush of wind that hums a sweet song. There's a gush of wind that fights like a hero to fill the world with possibility. There's a gush of wind that jumps across oceans and mountains, embracing the entire planet. There's a gush of wind that blows away darkness. There's a gush of wind that blows for humanity. Because at Hero, we care.
In 1868, the Tata Group was founded on a philosophy that put the community at the heart of its existence. Today, we are $100 billion global enterprise. Our today has been built on enduring values. Today is about delivering excellence across business sectors. is about building a future-ready nation. Our today has a strong foundation with community at its core. Our today is dedicated to the communities we serve. Today is always about more than just today. Our today is a continuous journey for a better tomorrow. Tata, leadership with trust.
Behold, the story of victory, of life over malady. Behold the saga of power, of science over sickness. Behold the tale of triumph, of dedication over disease. Behold the rise and rise of Cadila Pharmaceuticals Limited, one of India's largest privately held pharmaceutical companies based out of Ahmedabad, Gujarat, India. Cadila Pharmaceuticals was born out of the vision of a legend who left an indelible mark in the chronicles of Indian pharmaceuticals industry. He was Indravadan Ambalal Modi, the founder chairman of the company, rightfully christened as the medicine man of India. His vision to alleviate pain of the underprivileged through research-driven innovations has been driving Cadila Pharmaceuticals for more than 6 decades now. Innovations which are backed by the key strengths of the company, the state-of-the-art manufacturing and research facilities. The flagship manufacturing facility at Dholka, Gujarat, sprawls over 100 acres. This avant-garde facility is US FDA approved, besides meeting most of the stringent quality standards across the globe. It manufactures tablets, capsules, injectables, liquids, and orals. The second formulations manufacturing facility is located at Samba in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. The API facilities at Ankleshwar, Gujarat, manufacture a large number of key APIs and intermediates at this US FDA and ISO 9002 and ISO 14001 accredited plant. The company also has set up its first ever overseas formulation manufacturing facility at Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. This world-class facility is the only WHO CGMP compliant manufacturing facility in the region. More than 850 products spread across 12 specialties with many of India's top brands in its basket. Great goals are defined by far-sighted vision and achieved by seamless teamwork. A multicultural, multilingual and multinational workforce of over 7,000 employees is truly the propelling power of the company. Not just in the domestic market, the company has a wide global footprint with over 1,000 marketing authorizations across 85 countries. Its international sales force of over 150 highly diversified and versatile personnel lends it an outreach that blankets the globe. As the company grows, so does its commitment to research. Manned by more than 350 scientists, the R&D facilities of Cadila Pharmaceuticals at Dholka, Gujarat is an institution of breakthrough innovations. To take the focus on innovation to the next level, It partners with leading international companies to discover newer treatments. The Cadila Pharmaceuticals Group is gigantic. Its group companies complement and expand the dynamic vision of the company across new avenues of healthcare and newer fast-paced business areas. Cadila Pharmaceuticals is a gentle giant. Decades of dedicated research, groundbreaking healthcare innovations, and worldwide impact proves the infinite potential of one powerful emotion. Care. The success of Cadila Pharmaceuticals bears testimony to the fact that the care continues.
आने वाले कल की दस्तक हमें सुनाई देती है, नई मंजिल है जिस ओर हमें वो दिशा दिखाई देती है। नए इंडिया का नया जोश, नए इंडिया का नया जोश, नए जोश से निकल पड़े हम, आने वाला कल होगा हमारा। नए इंडिया का नया जोश।
और नए इंडिया के सफर में टेक्नोलॉजी की शक्ति लेकर आपका भागीदार रहेगा रिलायंस। नए इंडिया का नया जोश।
लाइफ में लेना देना तो चलता रहता है। इधर फ्लेक्सी लोन से बोरो कर लिया और उधर बाय मॉम डैड का वेकेशन डन। शादी का डिसीजन लिया, फ्लेक्सी लोन से और बोरो किया। प्रमोशन मिला तो ये लो थोड़ा लोन वापस कर दिया। थैंक यू। नए इंटीरियर
we could begin if
certainly.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon, good evening, and in fact good morning to a few people who are on the other side of the hemisphere. Minister for Health for Singapore, Mr Ong Ye Kung, Dr. Naushad Forbes, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, very, very warm and a very special welcome to everyone, but a very, very special welcome indeed to Minister Ong. We are so very honored that you are able to take time to be with us today, as you have always been supportive of working with Indian industry and with us at the CII, at the Confederation of Indian Industry. And we really deeply appreciate your intensive, if I can say, interest in India. Warm welcome to you, Minister, for this session. Ladies and gentlemen, as all of you know, Minister Ong is today the Minister of Health of Singapore. He's held several positions in the government of Singapore as ministers of various important fields: transport, education, in the defense sector, and today he is, amongst many other things, is of course also the board member of the Monetary Authority of Singapore, and many more. And I'm saying all this because as Naushad takes forward this discussion, many of what I mentioned could be relevant in the course of the discussion as we have. And Minister Ong's support, his strong guidance to CII over the last many years has really helped us, actually, if I can say, shape the engagement with the entire of the Asean region of ours, and with Singapore in particular. And all of us know the CII core group has been visiting Singapore since 1994. And it has always been a highlight of our global engagement year on year. The last 2 years, we have done it virtually, but we are all now pretty much set to go there into Singapore very much physically. Minister, our engagements with you have always, if I can say again, very open, very frank, extremely insightful. And every year we take back your advice, your vision, your directions for driving the agenda forward to deepen this very important critical economic relationship as we see it from our side. And since this year, Minister, what we have done as an institution, CII, we have embarked on a very much more purposeful, a little different and focused project-based collaboration across diverse sectors between our two countries through the industry, aligning the gaps and our strengths, and really creating more and more opportunities for our members, our firms, member firms. And as Minister of Health, and as of course also the co-chair of the multi-ministry task force on COVID, you are of course leading from the front, and it's and this has not been a very easy battle. We appreciate the phenomenal work that you have done. It continues to be an ever-evolving situation, forcing countries, governments, our businesses and people to keep grappling with a steep economic and human cost. And as we continue in the world to work towards recovery, our two countries' collaboration is indeed most critical, as we see, for not just our industries and people, but for the wider Asian region. I just wanted to say, Minister, before I hand over to Naushad, that the CII Partnership Summit, with which you are familiar, started way back in 1995 when CII completed 100 years of its existence. And we have always been most fortunate to have Singapore as a very, very strong partner, if I can say, of this summit for many years, from the participation of the then prime ministers to various ministers. And even in this edition, we are being so much honored with the participation of ministers from Singapore, including yourself. And this is our 27th edition. Mr. Minister, we have over 50 sessions that we have at this particular summit, which has started just a few hours back, spread over 3 days. And we have close to about 200 plus speakers of ministers from various countries, 20 overseas ministers, Indian ministers, global CXOs. So 40 countries in all participating, and in terms of speakers, and 100 countries from where we have delegates. So this is one of our biggest partnership summits, because it is probably virtual, but at the same time, we are very hopeful that we come back to a physical format from the next time onwards. With that, again, I welcome you, Honorable Minister, and hand over to Dr. Naushad Forbes. Naushad, who has been a regular member of the CII team, which has been participating, and he has led, as when he was the president of CII, the core group to Singapore. Over to you, Naushad.
Maybe before Naushad starts, let me just thank you, Chandrajit, for all your kind words and the friendship between CII, Singapore, and also the friendship you extend to me personally over so many years. I really enjoyed interacting with you and all your members over the years. This year, you actually saved me a lot of time because we are doing this online. Certainly next year, I hope to be able to be physically in India doing this dialogue, if we can, if we have the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you, Chandrajit. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. And I'd just like to add my own warm welcome to you, Minister. It's a real pleasure. We're delighted to have you with us today. We're all in India especially delighted with the extension of the vaccinated travel lane arrangement that Singapore brought in a few months ago. That being extended to India, we have deep engagements with Singapore, and the extension and inclusion of India in the VTL arrangement is really welcome. It enables us to take forward so much of our partnership and so much of our deep relationships that we've established over the years with Singapore. These are really uncertain times. Just when you think things are starting to get more normal, another variant of the virus comes along and disrupts things. And I know we look forward to hearing and learning from you, Minister, about how Singapore is thinking about this Omicron variant and how we need to, as a world, think of adjusting to it. we hope really that the new variant does not lead to further travel restrictions. There have been some that are necessary to bring in, of course, but travel, as we all know, is so necessary for not only business, but for building those broader connections and relationships that the world depends on. In India, as you know, Minister, we've been moving quite rapidly with our own vaccination program. We've now administered over 1.2 billion doses of vaccines. But given our huge population, this still means that only around 54-55% of our population is currently fully vaccinated. It's rising by around 10% a month. Having said that, there was a recent seroprevalence study done in Delhi, in the National Capital Region, which found that 97% of the population, including children, had antibodies against COVID, which is a reflection both of our vaccination program and our devastating second wave in May of this year. But it has, I think, helped COVID become somewhat endemic now in India. Singapore has been able to manage the COVID situation very well. As the Minister for Health and the co-chair of the multi-ministry task force, I think, Minister, you had the challenging task of managing the pandemic, of balancing sentiment, balancing economic interests with health interests. I know that wasn't an enviable task, Minister. It's, sometimes one knows that one has done a good job only when both sides are equally upset. That's sort of an affirmation that one found perhaps the right balance in what needed to be done. Without further comments from me, I thought we could straight away get into a discussion. Minister, let me start by asking you a question, and then I'll go to Chandrajit, and then we'll go back and forth. That with the Omicron variant now being seen in so many countries around the world, there is anxiety about where the world is, where the world's going. We've seen a strong revival of economic activity and normalcy, in a sense, as we've tried to get on with our lives in the last few months. But with the Omicron variant has really brought in this new element of uncertainty. And, so maybe to start with, we would love to hear from you, how should we think about the Omicron variant as countries? Are we headed for a situation of, renewed shutdowns and restrictions? How are governments planning to balance lives, livelihoods? How is Singapore in particular thinking about Omicron and how this needs to be handled by the world? And I appreciated very much your quick comment before we started, Minister, that the world is all is all together in this. And I think that philosophy is exactly the approach that we should all be taking. So look forward to hearing from you, Minister.
Thank you. It's a big question that it requires a long time to explain. But maybe I state a few key points, and you can grill me further after this. I would just say that from the perspective of a global pandemic, we should not be surprised with Omicron. I think WHO decided to pick Greek alphabets to name the variants because they expect many to come. And I think we may run out of alphabets soon. We start with alpha, beta, and omicron, and epsilon, and all this all went. Zeta, iota came and gone. We just didn't notice that. But we noticed Omicron because of the substantive difference in characteristic with Delta, because of the number of mutations. So I think we should expect that variants will keep coming. in a frequent basis. So that is the pandemic situation, and therefore we should expect COVID-19 to be with us for some time in various forms and various variants. And now specifically on Omicron, I think we all read a lot about it. No scientists will confirm that its characteristic is different in a very specific way. But the indications we get from inputs from doctors and scientists all over the world is that it seems to be milder, but yet it is a lot more transmissible. Yeah. So to many scientists, this is a natural progression of a virus if it wants to survive. So it harms fewer of its patients, but it spread faster. Is this good or is this bad? I describe this as a game of snakes and ladder. We really don't know. The next throw of the dice, you may end up on a snake, and Omicron bring you back to square one, back to last year, Naushad, you mentioned, back to the bad old days of shutdowns, constraints and restrictions, or it may even be a slight ladder up. If indeed we are looking at something substantially less harmful, more transmissible, and can overcome Delta, which means over time, it's more likely that we can live with such a variant. We don't know answer to that yet, but in the meantime, we need to be prepared. All of us are in this together, right? So all of us need to be prepared for a very significant Omicron wave. I think the situation is playing itself out, probably in the UK and parts of Europe, where Omicron and Delta are going head to head. We don't know for sure who will dominate. Yeah, this is a battle of the titans. Maybe Delta cannot be dislodged, or maybe Omicron can dislodge Delta. If it does, we should then expect Omicron to dominate the world in probably a few months' time. And it will come to Singapore, to Southeast Asia, it will come to India. How are we going to respond to it? I think there are two broad issues. One is, do we foresee borders closing down again and reverting back? You know, every government cannot tell you for sure. Yeah, I think when it comes to public health, we do have to strike a balance. But I can say that in the case of Singapore, the trade-off and the dilemma is more stark than any country. We are unlike many countries where territory is big. You can have a domestic economy, you shut your border temporarily, you can survive, you can have jobs. In Singapore, this is all we have, 760 square kilometers. We depend on connections with the world to survive. And without overseas connection, our people suffer, our economies suffer. Sometimes people forget that a small country like Singapore, travel and borders is not a matter of just foreign travelers and tourism. There's actually a lot of domestic activities that require travel. Our students travel overseas to study. We got so many MNCs in Singapore. All the executives require traveling overseas in order to connect, work with customers, work with suppliers, visit their plants. Even our workers need to travel overseas to reunite with their families. Healthcare sector, we suffered a little bit because we got quite a number of foreign nurses. They can't reunite with their families, and many of them end up quitting. And in the end, our own healthcare capacity suffered as a result. So we do need to travel, we need to keep our connections open. And so this will be a huge dilemma should Omicron become a threat, a public health threat again. As I said before, when I was Minister for Transport, the seaport and airport, they are like the two lungs of the Singapore body. It's what takes in oxygen and nourish the rest of the body. And COVID-19 strike at the heart of the lungs of the body. And so we must try our best to overcome. So having said that, I think this time round, the world and Singapore too, and India too, we are a lot more prepared than the Delta wave. As you say, in India, 97% is seropositive. Singapore probably less, but we are 96% vaccinated amongst those who are eligible. And we are extending to kids by end of this year. So with having gone through a big Delta wave, and we are at the tail end of it, and having vaccinated ourselves and having gained so much experience dealing with the big wave, we hope we can respond and be resilient towards the Omicron wave and be able to continue our policy of living with COVID. It will be a tragedy, to say we can live with COVID, but we can't live with Omicron. When it comes to Delta, it's living with Delta. When it comes to Omicron, it's COVID zero. It cannot work that way. We will have to live with all variants. And I think the key now lies in boosters and vaccinations. So I would strongly encourage too for India, even though there are many people who have recovered, I think they still need an additional shot to be totally resilient against Omicron. So I think our strategy was centered around vaccinations and boosters, as was the case with Delta. I will stop here. I think I can go on and on because it's such a huge topic.
Thank you, Minister. That's a most encouraging response, and it's indeed, I think, the way that we should be thinking about it. Not just Singapore, but the world should be thinking about how to deal with Omicron. Certainly, we will be subject to what happens actually on the ground and how severe it ends up being. But I think approaching it, as you mentioned, with using science, using vaccinations, using whatever we've learned in handling Delta is exactly the way in which we must address it. Thank you. I'm going to come to Chandrajit for a follow-up question, and then I'll come back in a minute.
Thanks, Naushad, and thank you, Minister, for that really broad and a very realistic picture. But before I come to a broader question, I thought I'll have a more specific one. And there are questions and debates around the world on globalization and its efficacy in the new world. And businesses are at this point in time continuing to realign and adapt to the ever-evolving situation. And there has been, if one can say, a tectonic shift in the way we are living and the way we are doing business. So how do you see how our ASEAN countries responding to the shifts in the trade scenario that are currently underway in an ever-evolving situation, as I said? And what would you like to advise global businesses? Many of them are actually present on this call.
Yeah, for ASEAN, a few things are going for us. Number one, that as a market, as a regional market, it is actually significant. 650 million people, rising middle class, and consumer powers going up, consumption going up. So as an economy, it's actually a very attractive hinterland, very weighty. It is quite a big gravitational pull for investments. And that's one. Two is the agenda for free trade continues in ASEAN. Yeah, we signed the RCEP. We wish India was part of it, but there will be another day. And internally, we are still working on trade liberalization for goods as well as for services and even digital trade, for example. So ASEAN too is increasingly integrating its economy together. What I think is tricky for ASEAN is, as all we know, or as all of us know, is the geopolitical situation. And I think the most important bilateral relations in this world is US and China. And we also know that if US is in loggerheads with China or vice versa, and it's not a constructive relationship and there's no peace, no stability, all bets are off. For every country in the world. There's just not enough peace and stability to create that kind of positive, benign business environment and to encourage trade and investment. But I think we all should stay optimistic that this is history in the making. And I think there are also strong reasons for us to believe that despite all their differences, the US and China have every incentive, strong incentive to work together where they can disagree, they will disagree, but there are also many other areas where they can work together, from anti-terrorism to climate change to now fighting COVID-19. There are just so many areas that they can collaborate with each other on a win-win basis and in their own national interest. So if we believe in that, and one big area is actually business, investments, trade. And so long as overall, the relationship is a constructive one, overall, then ASEAN can thrive. And so can India, because we will be able to play a useful role in that broad geopolitical situation. You take, for example, China too is moving out some of its manufacturing out of China. Cost is going up in many places in China, and they are moving to parts of ASEAN. And they are very good investments that create good jobs. Over time, you find Chinese companies too investing overseas in infrastructure, which they are already doing through Belt and Road, and that also benefit ASEAN. The US too continue to be the big technological powerhouse, saw ASEAN as a very attractive market. Important investments are located in ASEAN, and Singapore hosts many of the tech companies as well that uses Singapore as a springboard to reach out to the rest of ASEAN. So I think just play our role as a significant market, integrating our economy together, create as friendly an investment environment as possible. And so long as geopolitical situations are stable, ASEAN has a good optimistic future, I believe.
Thank you, Minister. You know, and I completely endorse your sentiments on India and RCEP. Some of us strongly advocated that we should be part of RCEP, that it's in India's long-term interest to be part of RCEP, and that in particular it's in Indian industry's long-term interest to be part of RCEP. And we will keep trying to persuade our friends to rejoin, and we appreciate very much Singapore's support for India's membership of RCEP.
But you're a big country with many views and many concerns.
Correct.
It take a bit more time, but ASEAN, I believe, will always welcome you.
Thank you. I wanted to return, if I may, to the pandemic and the question of vaccination that you referred to as well. And, you know, I think we've all been impressed with how rapidly Singapore has vaccinated its population. Agreed, it's a small population relative to India. You know, we need to vaccinate in India each day what Singapore needs to do in a sense overall. But it's still a very impressive achievement. You know, the question really is how do we really vaccinate the world? Because I was listening to someone the other day who said, well, if you look at the variants that we've been most affected by in the world, the Alpha variant emerged in the UK at a time when the population was unvaccinated because it was before vaccines were around. The Delta variant emerged and in India at a time when the population was largely unvaccinated. And now the Omicron variant seems to have emerged from Africa, again from a population that is largely unvaccinated. And you know, it's striking to me that the percentage of the African population that has been vaccinated is less than the percentage of the lowest country in Europe in terms of administering booster doses. You know, I think the lowest country in Europe for the third dose is 5%. The average for Africa is 4% in terms of vaccines overall. So we've got such a long way to go. And I wondered, Minister, you know, if the world is only going to be safe when it's fully vaccinated, how do we get there? What can we do to really get 7 billion people vaccinated, 7 billion people maybe even vaccinated each year? You know, the US has played some role in saying 1 billion doses that would be made available. But do we need a plan to vaccinate the world? What can you suggest to us as the way forward for the world, and what can India do in this regard as well as a large vaccine manufacturer?
I think most people who have thought about the problem, we all know the answer. This is like no different from a situation like climate change, where protecting our Mother Earth, or vaccinating the world has become a global commons. It's a global commons that require global cooperation to achieve. But yet, like all global commons, it requires everyone to put in an effort, because the effort you put in, you don't get a payout. It's not obvious, because the payout is in a world that is safer. Yeah, but the world will be safer only if everyone do their part, and that is the situation now. And Omicron is a good example. We can do a fantastic job in vaccinating our own population, but if there's a continent somewhere or a big country somewhere unvaccinated, or have a big number of immunocompromised individuals, a variant will come out. And when the variant comes out, it can undo what you have done in terms of vaccinating your people. So we just have to, the world just have to get together to vaccinate the world. There has been a lot of conversations on this. Unfortunately, for such initiatives, it takes time. And I hope it wouldn't take too long. There have been conversations at G20. There was a high-level panel, came together, recommended all countries pledge a certain amount of money, I think it was 15 billion a year, and that will build up the facilities, infrastructure, and support, including to help poorer countries vaccinate themselves. So G20 leaders met and decided to form a task force to look at it further. Just 2 weeks ago, the WHO had a special health assembly. It's actually my first WHO assembly, attending as health minister, which has a follow-up, which is following up on this idea and there was agreement that we should set up an international instrument, such as a treaty, but not all countries will agree to a treaty, but you need some form of international instrument that can bring everyone together to have a consensus that this is what we will do. So I see that at the WHO end and G20 end, there have been some progress and some dialogue and some conversations moving in this direction. But we have to push ahead, because even if we get away with Omicron this time, there will be future variants coming out of places that are under-vaccinated and under-provided. And the world has to be in this together. In Singapore, we are very small. Just like climate change, we consume 0.1% of the world's carbon, or we emit 0.1% of the world's carbon. And likewise, for COVID cases, we contribute a small percentage of world infections, but we will do our best to do our part and persuade others in this global endeavor.
Thank you, Minister. We'll go to Chandrajit again.
Oh, thanks, Naushad. Thanks, Minister, for that really very, very, very clear perspective. I want to probably move towards a little bit of probably a personalized question for you, and the roles of the health ministers across the world. It's not really one of the most envied portfolios in the last 2 years, if I can say. And it's and though you said that Singapore was unique, the number of, if you really look at the percentage wise, but how did you prepare for this role as a health minister, and what were your main challenges, pandemic and otherwise?
I suppose there are two aspects to preparation. One is I've been preparing this my whole life, because I spent time in public service in private sector for a while, and then in the unions. And every day of work, you learn something. until you receive a huge assignment like this one. So you can say, I've been preparing for my next assignment all the time. But the truth is I didn't have time to prepare. The Prime Minister sent me here at short notice and just got to learn the ropes quickly. Fortunately, as Minister for Education and as Minister for Transport, I've been an active member of the multi-ministry task force. So I'm familiar with the issues and that has helped me pick up quickly. But the situation changed so fast. Every week you find that you are a new minister, and because you have to deal with a totally different situation, and actually how things were done in the past we should be careful not to burden us in changing our course of action for the next challenge. We are battling a shape-shifting virus, and we better shift as fast as it.
Thank you, Minister. Thanks. I wanted to come back to ASEAN, which Chandrajit asked you about earlier on, and it's a much broader, a broader topic. I know. ASEAN in the last month took a stand on the whole issue of Myanmar in terms of the military coup, and India has also taken a stand recently after the senior counselor, the court judgment against the senior counselor last week. And it's interesting because, we've so far tended to, ASEAN has tended to be quite focused on economic issues. My understanding is that Singapore has actually played a key role in pushing ASEAN in the direction of being more forthright and taking a position in this area. And any thoughts from you, because it's been very encouraging to many of us, to see ASEAN maybe slowly but very clearly moving in the direction of trying to address one of the great challenges in the region. Right.
I must say the health ministry didn't play a big role in this.
Okay.
But you mentioned that ASEAN has usually been involved more focused on economic issues. In some way it's true, but we have also focused on diplomatic issues and political issues. The ARF, for example, and actually the ARF started, I can't remember which year, but it has become a very useful platform for different powers of the world to come to ASEAN and have a dialogue with ASEAN and with each other. And ASEAN has two parts, an archipelagic part and a continental part. But basically it is that intersection of different cultures, histories, and religions. And I think because of that history and that geographical reality, ASEAN has always been neutral and politically quite neutral, and provide that neutral platform for powers to engage each other. And so actually, I think while politics is not a major focus on our agenda, we quietly play quite an important role, which leads to your next question. And will ASEAN therefore veer itself towards taking stands on political issue? I think we are like the host. Yeah, in a big wedding, we are neither the bride or the groom, but we provide all the food. We have good guests, and we provide a wonderful venue for bride and groom to come together, and for different friends to come together. That I feel will, for a long time to come, the geographical purpose of ASEAN, and geographical and political purpose of ASEAN.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Thanks. So always so much insightful to listen to you. And Naushad, if I may, just go on to a broader area. Again, being endemic is the end game for the entire world. And what should be the in your thinking, what should be 3 areas of focus as we sort of race to control the situation and minimize the damages to human life?
I think first is, I'm not sure I can come up with 3, but the first one that come to mind was what Anushat asked earlier, which is how do we get to vaccinating the world? And only when we can do that up to a certain level, and I think we can get a handle on COVID and whatever nasty variants it may throw up later. So that's number 1, and it is a global effort. Number 2 is, I think, within each country, the need to build that trust with people, that our responses, whether it's healthcare, whether it's social restrictions, vaccination, border opening, we need to strike a balance. And it's not an easy balance. And so internally, every country, our political situation must allow us to strike that balance and not let it go lopsided, such that you open up at all costs or you shut your borders in a perpetual way. And I think that is not healthy for the world. At some point, all of us should meet roughly at the same water level, where we strike a balance between opening up and maintaining lives and livelihoods at a delicate balance. I think the final thing, if it's a response at all, is that we should also all be psychologically on the same page. Sometimes, for example, when Delta came to Singapore and we experienced it, and I saw it firsthand, is that our people are already highly vaccinated. So for the great majority, other than the vulnerable, the old, the sick, the unvaccinated, the great majority of us can treat it like a bad flu. We will get it and we can recover without needing to go to hospital. But it was not easy for us to reach there. The initial wave arrived, and I think the population is not used to this. We have not encountered something like that before. Our recent memory is SARS, which is a far more scarier and deadly disease. And so psychologically, we are not ready to accept something that is less harmful, especially if you're vaccinated, but a lot more transmissible. So as a result, there's a lot of anxiety. People run towards the hospital, to the emergency department the moment they feel something is unwell. Have I gotten COVID? It will be very serious. I run to the hospital. And that added a lot of pressure to the hospital. Also, psychologically, are we all prepared to say, if all of us just show some restraint in our social activities, we actually slow things down while living life quite normally, and then we can slow down the virus and get a handle on it. So all this is social psychology. And I think there is also such a thing called a global psychology, that we must all get to the same page where we feel with modern science and our collaboration with each other, we can control this and we can live with it. And only then, maybe at some point, we won't be obsessed with monitoring top-line infection numbers anymore, especially if it's a mild illness for the great majority of us. But instead, we look at just as many endemic diseases. We look at severe illnesses, we look at ICU rates, we look at death rates. Those are the things that matter. But it requires a certain psychological shift for us to be all on that same page with a consensus of what the nature of the problem is. That is living with COVID. We have always defined living with COVID in terms of borders opening, in terms of whether we can have parties and eat in restaurants. But to me, actually, the bigger factor of living with COVID is a state of mind and our psychology revolving around the disease.
Thank you, Minister. I couldn't agree with you more. I think managing the psychology is as important as managing what we do on the ground. When we look around ourselves in India as well, but certainly when we've visited other places, we've been somewhat scared by how open some areas are. It's and it seems not very wise. It's to not wear masks indoors, to permit such very large gatherings. It's
a different psychology, right?
It's a different psychology.
And I've also been to places where there is just so much worry, and yet vaccination is not very high, but yet there's so much worry. So we got to adjust our water level and
absolutely, and find that balance. And it's I fully agree. One of the things that's striking is how East Asia, and I'm including Singapore in this, has done a much better job of controlling mortality, infection rates, initially following a policy of zero COVID. But then country after country, starting with Singapore, but now also including Australia, New Zealand, have moved to living with and moving towards an endemic COVID. Any thoughts on why East Asia has done so much better than the rest of the world?
It's a function of what diseases were met in the past. In the case of Europe and US, they see influenza every year. So they've gotten used to living with influenza. The death toll of influenza is not small, but they went on vaccinations and then trying to stay home if it's a bad flu season, but essentially treating influenza as an endemic disease. And therefore, when COVID comes, your public health response is geared up to treat it as an influenza type endemic disease. That's what I mentioned. That's why I mentioned just now that your past practices can hamper your response to a new enemy. It happens to everyone. Yeah, so that was the West, Europe and US's natural response. Unfortunately, it's a painful response. The results are painful. In the case of East Asia, many countries in East Asia, Australia, New Zealand included, we've seen SARS. So SARS is scary. It kills a third of the people it infects. And therefore, we have a zero SARS response. We need to contact trace every case. We need to come up with a test quickly, identify who has it, isolate, contact trace, isolate the rest, go for zero cases. And when we saw COVID, we thought we saw SARS. And the playbook we adopt was the SARS playbook. It worked well for us up to a point, because when we started vaccinating ourselves, it's no longer like SARS, far from SARS. In the case of Singapore, 0.2% of our infected individuals go to ICU. Yeah, and 2/3 of them are unvaccinated. So if we have vaccinated them, the percentage that go to ICU is actually half that of influenza. So we can really treat it as an endemic disease, but the psychology wasn't right, because we've been treating it as SARS for so long. It's not easy for society to flip psychology over time. So that's what we have really been working on over the past few months, riding through a Delta wave. By going through a Delta wave, psychology shifted, healthcare response shifted, personal responsibility shifted, the sense of personal responsibility shifted. And so we started learning from the methods of the US and Europe. I was in Italy some time ago, and I just talked to them, and there's just so much they are doing that is so interesting that we never thought of, because we treat it as a SARS. When you treat it as endemic disease, there's so many more techniques that you can use. So we're learning that. Yeah. So the world at some point got to come together. Zero COVID versus Freedom Day. There must be somewhere in between that we can all agree on, that psychologically that's where we should be.
Thank you, Minister. Chandrajit?
One last question, Minister. Thank you again for the deep insights in what the world needs to do to move forward. And every time and every year when we meet you, Minister, as a core group, we ask you a few questions, and on behalf of our members and behalf of our businesses, companies, firms, member firms, what do you think that we can do together, in the healthcare sector especially, or even going beyond it? And what could be those few areas of critical areas of collaboration? How can our CII members support and collaborate with Singapore to be really future ready and spur growth and development? And this is a question that we would have normally asked you in a core group meeting.
Yeah, thanks. I want to repeat some of my answers that I gave you during your group meeting, which is I still feel strongly about skills training and education. And this continues to be an area, while it has been stalled by COVID, I think remains a very promising area for our country's collaboration. And we have gotten off to start some projects in India, different states. And I visited a few of them, 3 of them, in fact. And I think once travel opens again and it's possible for people to move to and fro, we should continue to explore those opportunities. Skills training is just so important in terms of equipping individuals to be able to take up economic opportunities presented by globalization. It is not just an economic proposal, it is actually a most important social intervention policy that we should work on. Specifically then in healthcare, I've been so caught up with COVID, I've not thought about the sector development aspect of this issue. But what I do notice is that when COVID is over, which it will, the longer term challenge for the healthcare sector in Singapore is aging, and together with aging, rising incidence of chronic illnesses, and also escalating healthcare costs. Our healthcare expenditure is expected to triple in the next 10 years, purely driven by aging and higher incidence of chronic illnesses. Every doctor, every nurse, every medical worker will tell you, don't wait until a person is chronically so ill. Why don't you do something before they are so ill? In other words, the future of healthcare is primary care, which is preventive in nature, and it happens in communities, and it doesn't involve a lot of heroics, like what you see on TV, operating theater, surgeries, major procedures, but simple things: exercise, eat well, live well, stay optimistic, and be mindful, have self-awareness, practice mindfulness, do some yoga, or Pilates, and meditation, all this as the case may be, as the individual may prefer. And these are important lifestyle changes. But that's where the excitement comes in, because it's a lot more democratic, it's democratized. You and I, our families, and everyone around us, even our coaches, our community nurses, can play a part to bring this about. So it can be a huge national movement for us to bring about a healthier population. In that process, because it's so democratized, IT plays a big part, gadgets can play a big part, data can play a big part. And that's when IT industry and the healthcare industry, I think, have an unprecedented opportunity to work together. And these are all sectors, whether it's pharmaceutical or IT, these are all sectors India is very, very strong in. And I think within that space is where we can seek opportunities for healthcare-related collaboration.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you. And a last question from my side as well. If you look forward a year to the end of 2022, what would give you satisfaction in terms of saying that this is good? This is how the pandemic has evolved. This is a good place to be. So if you look out 12 months, what would good look like to you?
I think you can have a good birthday or wedding party where people can all come together, enjoy the moment, celebrate as communities do, as societies do, and bring the human spirit back together again. That to me is one major marker.
I agree. I think that would be a very major marker, Minister. Minister, thank you. Thank you so much for your remarks, for your insights into so many of these areas. As always, we not only treasure our relationship with Singapore in CII, but we greatly benefit from your insights, your guidance, your inputs on how we should be thinking about the world, how we should be thinking about our engagement with the world as a country, as industry in India. And we appreciate that relationship and that input very much. So it's always wonderful to interact with you. So from CII, a very big thank you for being with us. And we look forward very much to meeting you in person. We now can travel to Singapore. I'm hoping to make my first visit in 2 years, sometime in the next month or two, and greatly look forward to being back in Singapore. And I'm sure as a core group, we're all looking forward to being back in Singapore soon, as Chandrajit mentioned earlier on. So thank you again.
Thank you. Good. Let me know when you are here.
Thank you. I will. Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you very much, Minister.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you.